Perfect. Thank you for coming. Are we live? Good morning, everybody. Looks a bit like us and them, doesn't it, really? I think one of these days I'm going to merge you all together. So anyway, welcome to this meeting of the Landlord Services Advisory Board. My name is Paul Rivers, and I have the pleasure of chairing this meeting this time, and Terry will be doing it at the next one, especially as I'm assisted by Vice Chair Terry Daubney, who will do it next time. We are now live streaming on YouTube. Danielle, nice to see you. Please, may I ask that individual or personal cases are not discussed in open session, but rather taken up with I may have to start again. Let me start again. Good morning, everybody. Good luck. I've had them for so long, really. You know, second nature. Yeah. I mean, I can pretty much drive without them. You know, whereas I was short-sighted before. I still am short-sighted, I guess. You know, I could read perfectly happily. Is that better? That's fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've given you an extra 5 minutes to enjoy, to communicate, to have a bit of fun. Okay, team, I think we're back online now. So I'm giving you a little tippy tappy, and we'll start again. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Landlord Services Advisory Board. My name is Paul Rivers, and I am the chair. I am assisted by my vice chair, Terry Daubney. We are now live streaming on YouTube. Please may I ask that individual or personal cases are not discussed in open session, but rather taken up with relevant officers offline. If you wish to discuss exempt details, and that's for the members of this committee, are the pink papers at the back of your agenda, which are confidential, please wait for me to call a vote to go into exempt session. When we do that, only members of the committee can remain, and officers, of course. I think that's right, Leila, isn't it? So those of you that are not explicit members of this committee, you have to go and have a cup of coffee, but it won't be long. My view is that I want not to go into exempt, so we have to be very careful how we skirt around these things. Anyway, what I'd like to do now is to go around the room and get everybody here to introduce themselves for the benefit of our viewer. And maybe I can start with Rod Blackmore, who is chair of Customer Experience Group. Rod?
Yeah, I'm Rod Blackmore. I've been involved with various groups at Waverley. I'm a current chair of the Experience Group.
Hi, I'm Amy Walton, Housing Graduate Management Trainee at Waverley.
Morning, I'm Dave Madams, Tenants Panel, Riverside Court.
Morning, Chris Austin, member of the Tenants Panel and Lucasfield Residents Group in Hazelmere.
Good morning, I'm Jackie Keane. I'm a councillor for Shottermill and Critchmere in Hazelmere.
Good morning, I'm Alan Morrison. I'm a recently elected councillor representing Cranley West.
Good morning, I'm Dennis Bramble and I represent the Tenants Panel and I'm here as a guest.
Good morning, my name is Sally Purcell. I represent Shepherd's Court Residents Panel. Thank you.
Good morning, Rob Stratford, Vice Chairman of the Tenants Panel and Treasurer, and also a member of Oxford Ridge Redevelopment.
Hi, I'm Danielle Slight. I'm co-optee on the Tenants Panel.
Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, Customer Service Centre Manager. This is my colleague, Ailey Santos. She's a team leader for repairs.
Good morning. My name's Andrew Lawson. I'm a councillor for Webburn and Farnham.
Morning, William Jones, Business Manager for Ian Williams.
Morning, Adrian Bryant, Contracts Manager for Response Repairs and Voids.
Hi, Matt Alexander, Housing Operations Manager.
Morning, I'm Joe Warner. I'm the new Tenant Involvement Officer.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Annalisa Howson. I'm the Housing Service Improvement Manager.
Morning, I'm Layla Mansour and I am a Democratic Services Officer.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any, Layla?
Yeah, sorry, we have apologies from Councillor Rabini.
Thank you. Item 2, notes of the previous meeting. I've got 1 or 2 things to add to this, but in terms of their accuracy, members, are you, do you have any problems with the accuracy of the notes? Okay, that's good. 1 or 2 things that I have to say on it, just to pick up a few bits and pieces. Danielle, last meeting suggested that we wanted to follow up on relet review and decant policy. I believe that is now in our work program for 30th of the 11th. So that's this year, Danielle. So hang on in there. Drew Roberts has given me some updates, which I can summarize if I may, especially if I can find where I put them. Okay, just a number of little questions that were recorded in the notes, and Drew has come back to me on them. One of the questions were, are leaseholders required to have smoke detectors? Drew says this is something he'll need to discuss further with the home ownership team. For any leaseholder that is letting out their property, yes, they will. They would be required to install smoke detectors under their legal responsibilities as a landlord. Owner occupiers, it's a little less straightforward, as there's no obligation for them to have them installed. The only mechanism would be to have is whether there is an applicable term in their lease that would obligate a leaseholder to install them. That sounds a very legal issue. That probably means yes or no. If anybody wants to know what CDM is, as opposed to Cadbury's Dairy Milk, it's construction design and management. Construction design and management regulations 2015 sets legal responsibilities in all parties involving construction projects. So that just amplifies what we had. I always have a problem with the word biannual because I never know whether that's 6 months or 2 years. It is it is twice a year in this case. So in context of senior living reviews, twice a year. There was a question as to whether a tenant representative is included in the safety inspections for the twice yearly senior living reviews. Drew was going to progress that discussion. He's discussed it with David Brown, and he is happy to proceed with this suggestion. However, when each manager brought the suggestion up at the tenant meetings at their respective sites ahead of the most recent visits, nobody wished to take it up. We will continue to offer that option at future visits. Any other questions on the notes of the previous meeting? No? Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for all those bits and pieces. Item 3 on our agenda, declarations of interest. Any declarations later? Thank you. Questions from members of the public, Leila? Thank you. And number 5, questions from members, Leila? Thank you. Excellent. So item number 6, responsive repairs and voids update. We are to receive a presentation from him, right? And from William Jones, who is representing Ian Williams to us today. And we'll have a Q&A afterwards. But as I said at the start, let's not be specific about them and be as general as we can. So, William, please.
Thank you. Thank you. What I've tried to do here is just give you an overview of the last 5 months. I've been in the business since the beginning of June. I think it's fair to say we had some issues, inherent issues, which we identified and started to change from June onwards. So just insofar as like sort of from a context perspective, we receive on average somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 jobs a month, reactive orders, or we complete 11 to 1,200 reactive orders a month. So if you look at the red line on the graph there, that basically indicates at the end of each month what our WIP position is. And our WIP is the number of live orders we have open at any one time. So we as a business work on the premise that we like to have 2.5 weeks WIP. So if you take the view, WIP is work in progress. So if you take the view that like sort of 2.5 weeks to us is probably somewhere in the region of about 650, 700 live jobs. You can see at April, we were 1,200, pretty much the same May. We started making our changes from June onwards, and on the basis of the line graph there, you can see we started to get more work done, complete more work, and reduce down to where we were, well, where we are at the end of August there, which is circa 650. So the steps, and I'll come on to the steps and measures we've actually put in place and we will continue to put in place in the next, like in the following quarter. But that gives you an indication of the amount of work that was there and the amount of work that we've got through and the amount of jobs we've completed. Now, the bar graphs going up for each month, they indicate the emergency, urgent and routine performance. So again, we were a lot to be desired April, May, but with the changes that we started making June, July, August, you can see by category in terms of like sort of our attendance and completion times, they've increased. And we've got to the point now where from an emergency and an urgent perspective, we are where we need to be. We've still got work to do on the routines, which is, I think now we're probably in around about 85%, but obviously our aim is to get that like sort of north of 90 in the next quarter and then on to 95. There's a lot of factors that affect or involve like sort of specifically on routine jobs in terms of attending and completing within the required contractual time. But in respect to like sort of where we've come from and where we are now in the space of the 3 months period, it's, as I say, although we're not there yet where we want to be, we're starting to see a step process and a positive impact of the changes that we're making. Okay. Would you just go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what I'd like to do is try and give you an idea of what we've done and what we've changed and what we continue to change. So the first thing that we looked at in June was just basically our operational management structure in terms of what we had, what wasn't working, what needed to, I'd say, what we needed to amend. What was clear to start with was the fact that everyone was running around being very busy, but we weren't structured in terms of like sort of what we did and how we did it. So it was clear defining lines for our contract managers and our working foreman and giving them succinct responsibilities to undertake the level and the type of work that we wanted to undertake. Again, like sort of, I mean, the processes that we had in place were, the lines were blurred. And so on the basis of that, that led to some confusion in regard to who was doing what when. And on that basis, then like sort of you've got your priorities aren't defined. So probably the biggest change we made was we split the workforce, because what became very apparent was we were sending individuals to larger jobs. They were attending the larger jobs, but they weren't getting the traction or completing the works that we needed them to complete. So we took the view probably mid to late June, early July. We broke probably half the workforce out to do what we class as the fast response jobs, which is inherent in where we are in regards to the emergencies and the urgent performance. And then the other half of the workforce was on the larger works that we would go pre-site plan and then set a time to deliver. Again, not where we need to be yet in terms of where I'd like to be anyway, but we are seeing the improvements, and it's the KPIs would like sort of attest to that. The next, the middle section is what we class as our DLO, which is what our direct labour. Again, like sort of not a nice thing to talk about, but middle of June, like sort of end of June, beginning of July, we took a performance review with our direct lads, and as in most things in life, certain individuals were good at certain things, others weren't. So from a churn perspective, there's 5 individuals, direct employees, have left the business since the middle of June, end of June, but we've brought another 7 in. So it was a case of, right, what skill sets do we need? What haven't we got? What isn't performing well enough? I mean, From an electrical perspective, we need electrical resource. We were subcontracting too much of that. That's all delivered in-house now. Skill sets like flooring, skill sets like sort of plumbing, all delivered in-house now. It's when you've got these smaller, quick jobs, direct delivery will always be the better option, but you've still got to have the individuals who can undertake that and deliver that in the time and have the skill sets to undertake the task that they need to undertake. And the last thing, probably symptomatic of every business now, is recruitment. You've got to recruit. You cannot stand still. You've got to keep moving, because individuals will be attracted to other businesses. Individuals mightn't be able to keep up with the standard or like sort of the timeframes that we set. You have got to continually recruit. So if anyone, you know, any good tradesmen, we're open for a conversation, like sort of, because word of mouth has always been the best way I found to attract the right people. And finally, the supply chain. Inherently, or I can say we inherited, or there were certain individuals who, let's say, or businesses that might have had grandfather rights, they've been on the contract for a long time. When we undertook a review with those those contractors, again, they weren't aligned to the performance level that we needed or we wanted. So over the last 3 months, there's been a transition with some contractors leaving, but we've also brought new contractors in who can align to the KPIs that we want and we demand. Obviously, there's a learning process. You can't do it overnight because you've got to transition, as I say, like sort of an old subcontractor out and bring a new subcontractor in to learn the contract, learn the processes, learn the area, learn the regions. But overall, we now outsource less. We were probably outsourcing somewhere even 40 to 45% of the work. We're now down to, I would argue, probably 25, 30% with the view to getting it down to 20%. But they will be just the specialist items, which would be your drainage, your larger roofing jobs to a certain extent, and potentially larger groundworks. However, things like A&A, things like sort of flooring, elements like that, that we would always look to outsource. Now we have the direct labour who can undertake those tasks. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks very much. I hadn't dropped off. All right. I was waiting for the third slide. No, thank you very much for that. Okay, with the proviso that we don't want to talk about specific or individual cases, if I may just start us off with a rhyme that was associated, is associated, and will be associated with my daughter. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. If I can leave that, and Terry, and then Jackie.
Thank you, William. And I'm going to try not to shoot the messenger really, but tenant satisfaction has continued to drop for 5 years. And I know that's not all Ian Williams, but a fair proportion of that is. Communications, failure to keep your tenants informed, delayed, missed appointments, and a perceived feeling from tenants that there's little respect shown to tenants. I was recently told by Ian Williams that for an Ian Williams employee, basically, that was the standard of work for social housing, which knocked me back a bit. Ian Williams produced a statement of promises in their procurement process that they would hold tenant meetings across the borough on a regular basis, keeping tenants informed. I'm unaware in the time that Ian Williams have been here that they've done that at all. They certainly haven't done that through the tenant panel. I've requested myself inviting senior managers of Ian Williams to meet with the tenants panel. That appears to have been ignored. It was quoted to me the other day on some of these things, that the communications and missed appointments, that when I queried about an appointment being missed, they said it wasn't missed because we informed the tenant after 4 o'clock that we weren't coming. Now, I mean, there's some words I could say, but that's not fair. that is a missed appointment. It's also been quite, I've also heard that there is, and I'm pleased to hear that you're making efforts, but to move the service, but judging by the recent satisfaction, we really have got a long way to go.
Thanks, William. Do you want to respond, or do you want to wait for Jackie's comments? Which would you like to do? Okay, please carry on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like sort of what you hear and like sort of in respect to like sort of that feedback, it's not pleasing to us. It's not pleasing to me. I mean, I can only comment insofar as like sort of what I've seen in the last 3 months. And as I said, I mean, I think from what you stated there, like sort of it's been 5 years, like sort of where you've seen obviously tenant satisfaction, like sort of decrease such. I think there's quite a long lead time operationally in terms of what we change on in regards to like sort of what our operatives do when they actually go to properties and we undertake work. And it does take like sort of probably 3 to 6 months for that to filter through properly to the tenants when they start seeing continuously. It's well and good turning up to one appointment of the 1100 that we do in a month, like sort of completes, turning up to one of those appointments. It's got to be symptomatic across the piece. And I'd like to sit here and tell you like sort of every single tenant will get the exact service that they want all the time. It's a very, how can I put it? There's a lot of levers in the process. And as I sit here now, after 3 months, I'd say at least it'd probably better in another 3 months where can we discuss to see if those measures that we've put in place have rectified like sort of what you're stating there. But I have to start somewhere. And where I start now is obviously by reviewing the workforce, bringing new people in. I mean, I'm quite disappointed in terms of what one of the operatives says here. That is not the Ian Williams standpoint that this is what you expect in social housing. That's not the case. Well, from our standpoint anyway. But as I say, I've churned with it's five individuals have left the business out of a workforce of, I think it was 15 in the beginning of June. So you're talking about like sort of what, 40% of the workforce, then we brought another 7 in. But when we recruit these individuals, it's a case of we recruit them on their skill sets. And then obviously like sort of we would expect them to treat the tenants with respect and undertake the work in line with like sort of what we deem to be as an acceptable repair.
Thank you for that, William. You know, yeah, it was a case really that, from my point of view, you need to know how tenants feel, and you know, it's now open to you to get that right. We need to get it right. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a councillor, I'm very disappointed, I have to say, because it's the councillors and the officers that get the backlash when your people don't turn up. And this is happening time and time again, really. I mean, I've had people knocking on my door, and one in particular, she changed her work schedule twice because she was notified that somebody was coming and they didn't turn up. So the third time she rang and they said, oh, well, you know, if we come next time and you're not in, we won't come back again. And that was from your operator. Can't do that to tenants. You have to treat them with respect, I have to say. And, you know, they don't talk to our tenants as they should. You have to have a communication with the tenant. That's how they need to be, you know, they need to be valued as our tenants. And if they have a problem, it's your responsibility to sort it out for them. I have a tenant at the moment that hasn't had a cooker for a week. So her husband's been cooking in the shed and taking it indoors. Do you think that's right? Do you really think that's right? Because I don't.
I don't know the actual details of what you're saying there. Obviously, it doesn't sound right. No, far from it. I mean, insofar as Yeah, I said without, I couldn't, in terms of the circumstance you just stated, yeah, it's not right. I mean, whether that is something that sits within our remit, I do not know, unless I knew the detail.
If I could come back, they also have had a toilet that hasn't been functioning. And again, your operative told them just to tip water down the toilet after they'd used it.
I said,
if I can butt in at this point, Jackie, if we can pick this one up specifically afterwards. Yeah. Okay. So you're happy just to raise this one thing. William, anything further to add?
No, other than like sort of obviously what the councillors just stated there, like sort of it's if we can take it outside of this, I think I'll be able to obviously respond with a little bit more context and information.
Thanks very much. Any more questions? Andrew, as a new person, would anything to ask? Always welcome.
No, I really just come here just to hear exactly what's going on. So at this stage, I have no questions, but thank you for the feedback.
Oh, Danielle, sorry. Yes, please.
Hi, did I read the graph right, that you've got a huge amount extra jobs than you did just a few months ago?
No, it works the other way. So the line was
not the line, the numbers.
No,
reported.
that's the performance.
Oh, okay.
So that's the percentage completions.
Okay.
So it's not the volume, it's the percentage.
Not the volume.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to kind of try and bring it together a little bit. So Landlord Services Advisory Board and tenants know that the performance on responsive repairs has not been what we wanted it to be. And we've been working hard to try and change that. Since William's come in post, you can see from the figures that he's provided that the number of jobs outstanding is reducing, the percentage of jobs being completed within time is increasing. And what I want to draw your attention to is when we get to the Q1 performance report, you will see that those statistics are quite shocking and red, and we've not met the target. So if there's any other questions you wanted to ask about that while we've got William in the room, that would be good. And just really to say that, you know, the housing service works together within Williams. It's not them and us, we're a partnership. And you know that we want to make sure that tenants are at the heart of the service and treated with respect. So if we get incidents of that being reported back to us, we will investigate and take those things forward. And just really to say that the information from the Q1 report is based on April, May and June. And the information that you've just received from William is from June, July, August. So all being well, when we get the same stats back at the end of September, we will be able to see an improvement in the performance. And one thing that Adrian told me that has stuck with me is that once you've got a backlog of jobs, it's quite difficult to get through them. So that even when you're working really hard and making progress, the stats won't actually stack up, because if something's been waiting for 2 months to happen, then when it's completed, it throws your stats out. So it just takes a little bit of time for us to hopefully show that performance has been improved. So please do hold us to account, scrutinise us, but also try and have a longer view of the progress that we're making as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Annalisa. And William, thank you. It's not the nicest thing to sit here and get all of these compliments being thrown at you.
You know, I'll suffer.
But I mean, sorry, Danielle and Andrew, is Danielle?
Would it be worth at some point for us to really start digging into the systems in place and seeing maybe what goes wrong and why, and how it could be improved?
Yeah, we recognise that, so we're in the process of looking at that. It's a little bit of resources issues, but we are looking at all those that data and looking at the non-accesses and how many, and digging much deeper into that. So that is one of our little projects we're going to be doing quite soon from Waverley side. And I with regards to the tenant panel, we will make sure that happens, that there is representative from Ian Williams on the panel moving forward. Is that acceptable? So we can have some engagement. Absolutely.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I'm listening with interest, but you obviously got some statistics in terms of the absolute outstanding jobs and graphs showing what's happened over the last few months. How do you record, or how do you take into account, seems to be an alleged attitude from some of the people turning up to these tenants? How is that managed, or how do you control that? Thank you.
Annalisa, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you've actually, I can now answer my one question, my one point with two answers. The first one was to say that we have the responsive repair satisfaction survey that's completed. So we get the TLF information through monthly, which gives us a really good indication of what it's like for a tenant to receive a responsive repair from us. And some of we every quarter review that information, and we've taken some steps to improve the performance, such as taking on board information about the text messaging being a little bit unclear. We've made amendments to that text to make that clearer. And picking up from your point, that is when we find out how the service was for the tenant. We have a number of questions, such as, was it completed in time? Was the job to your was the right thing done, and how was the operative's attitude, and did they clean up after themselves? And I have to say, generally, the contractors score really highly on tenant attitude and how they conduct themselves and how they leave the property. So if we've got these isolated cases, we really want to make sure that those are fed back to us, so we can pick those up and look at them. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Oh, Chris?
Just say that from a tenant's point of view, of course, which I am, surely a lot of this liaison, if you like, with regards to repairs, etc., and so forth, from a tenant's point of view, must go to Waverley. So therefore, any business between Ian Williams must go through Waverley again, responding to the tenant, rather than direct.
Well, I think I understand what you're saying. So yes, the tenant's relationship is with Waverley, the landlord, and you speak to our customer service centre to raise jobs as required. And then that information is passed to Ian Williams, who then confirm the appointments and manage the work. Of course, tenants can talk to Ian William operatives while they're there, but if additional work needs to, if significant additional work needs to be done, then yes, that has to come back to be agreed by Waverley before more work can be completed.
Yeah, but if something occurs, and Ian Williams, in theory, would say to the tenant, I'll get back to Waverley, or Waverley will get back to you to confirm which way they're going or what they're doing. Because at the end of the day, the tenant's contract, in theory, is with Waverley.
Yeah, and that's where we get the focus on, if we can get responsive repairs and communications right, then we're delivering an excellent service.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're constantly monitoring that communication and that feedback. And as you know, we've spoken before about making sure we close the circle of our engagement with tenants. If it's been, if it's a responsive repair, if it's a mutual exchange, if it's a complaint, we need to make sure that we're closing that circle with that communication.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annalisa. I think when it comes down to it, the key thing is, well, two things. It's correct assessment and communication. Tenants and Ian Williams and Waverley officers need to be on the same level. So often I've come across complaints have come to me, and I'm the first person to hear it, rather than responding directly back to Waverley. So, you know, we all have to try and do it better. But the real problem, of course, I do know, is that when a tenant is expecting a repair or an attendance, they don't necessarily think immediately of updating Waverley on progress, and sometimes they feel they have to go back to Ian Williams to rearrange, and we don't know that, or we in Waverley don't know that. So, well, it's all our responsibilities, and to make sure that everybody knows what else is going on. But we rely on you, William, not you personally, but your company, to help us get a better service to our tenants. They deserve it. They pay the rent, and they come in to see us every month, which is really nice. We have more tenants than this. William, thank you for your attendance today. Anything else to say to William before? Yeah, there's no traps, there's no barbed wire or anything. You can get out freely, I believe. William, thank you for your time. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7, Customer Experience Group presentation. So, Joe, are you going to lead this?
No, Rod will be making the recommendation, but just to introduce it, this will be the first recommendation made by the Customer Experience Group. Over to Rod.
Thank you, Chair. The Customer Experience Group was given access to the council complaints data in order to identify problem areas for the council housing service and formulate their future work plan. The data included information on time taken to respond and resolve complaints, the data from both level 1 and 2 complaints, and any lessons learned recorded at the system. After reviewing complaints data, the group found that the majority of upheld complaints had no lessons learned attached to them. The group learned from speaking with staff that the reason behind no lessons learned being recorded was mostly that staff were unaware of the function's existence. This points to potentially a training issue. The group recommends that actionable lessons learned be recorded on all upheld complaints. An investigation should be conducted into the process behind adding lessons learned to upheld complaints. And all staff likely to handle complaints should be given additional training on the lessons learned function in the council's complaints handling system. The group would like them then to review the process and the results of the investigation in 6 months' time to see if issues have been identified and changes have been made. Thank you.
Rod, thank you very much for that. That's very clear. Any comments? Annalisa?
First, I'd like to thank the Customer Experience Group for their energy and motivation and dedication into reviewing complaints and coming up with some suggestions for us. It's a really interesting point that lessons learned aren't recorded. As the service improvement team, that is something we look at complaints and see where service improvements can be made. So that's definitely something we'll take forward. We are undertaking a bit more of a review of complaints handling as a whole. As you may know, the Housing Ombudsman Service have a code for how to handle complaints. With the new regulations that I'm going to talk about next, there's much more advice and support and scrutiny of how social landlords are dealing with complaints. And it is an area we want to improve on and make sure that we're very sorry to hear that people have a complaint to make about our service. First of all, we'd want to deliver a service that didn't have any issues, but where there is, we need to make sure that we fully understand those issues, investigate properly, and then, as you say, make sure we've got a record of those lessons learned. We can create an action plan and then go back and monitor to make sure those same issues aren't happening again. So I welcome the feedback. And we will make a commitment to come back to you and Landlord Services in 6 months to report back on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annalisa. Just to remind me, and Rod, do you meet on a regular basis? Or when's your next meeting?
Yes, we were meeting initially to set up the group at 4 weekly intervals, but in finding that we need more time to go through the data, we've decided now to work at 6 weekly intervals. Our next meeting will be on the 2nd of November.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And Danielle?
That sounds like really useful and helpful feedback, and it'll be good to see that implemented. I can't believe that lessons learnt weren't in the system, but it's good to hear that they will be, and then they'll be acted upon. What I would be interested to hear is what happens when a complaint comes through. If I'm in the complaints team and I answer a phone call with a complaint, what are the steps then? Because 10 working days response time is too long. Generally, when people complain, it's at the absolute end of their tethers. It's when things have been going wrong and wrong and wrong, because I would say that we don't tend to complain. So these people who are complaining, things have gone really wrong. And so to wait 10 days, ultimately people complain because they need a response, and they're hoping that if they go through to the complaints team, something will happen. So what does happen? Do they have to wait 10 days? Well, 2 weeks for an answer.
Hi.
Yeah,
okay, so I've just recently taken over corporate complaints, which includes housing. So we are reviewing what we're doing. What I would say to you is, if when a complaint comes in, the customer service centre team will assess it very quickly. We deal with the issue. So if there's still a toilet not working or there's a leak somewhere, that is resolved very quickly through the team. The 10 days is to establish what's gone wrong, what we're doing to fix it, and lessons learned. The tool that we have, which is an automated system on our it works very well. There are lessons learned. What we're doing is, in fact, we've booked it for November. In terms of the managers group, we will be doing a presentation on complaints to the managers group, which should feed down then to officers who deal with complaints. But what we do is, as soon as we get that complaint, we address the issue and we get that resolved as quickly as possible, which means fixing the problem. So in terms of the 10 days, that's to get a formal response back to explain what's happened. So that's what should happen. So the 10 days is to give a proper written response to our tenant to say, we're sorry if it's been our fault or whatever's gone on. This is what we've learned from it. This is how we're going to deal with it. It's already, and hopefully by, within the 10 days, that should have already been resolved within a day or two of even getting the complaint, because we should be immediately on it, which is what Ailey's team get onto and sort out. It then gets allocated to our back office team to investigate, how did it go wrong? What went wrong? Where, what can we do to sort it out, and what can we learn from that? So we don't necessarily answer the complainant. We sort the problem out and make sure that the complaint is sorted, if it's a leak or whatever it might be. We then rely on our back office team to respond and to investigate further as to where did it go wrong and why did it go wrong and what can we learn from it. So that's how the complaint system works.
And are the tenants kept updated all through the process?
So there's an automated system which acknowledges that. They would be contacted in terms of rectifying the complaint, in terms of, my fence is broken and it's been taken months. We rectify that very quickly by telephoning them, sending emails and speaking to our repairs contractors to make sure that they go and resolve that. And then if we can't respond, the 10 days is for the officers in the back office to investigate and say, why did it go wrong? They can update, and they do, but you do get an automated response saying, allow us 10 days to investigate this for a formal response. But in terms of getting the problem sorted, it's the team, and they do phone them. We do it all day long. We're doing it. So yeah, they do get contacted. And if they're not, they need to let us know, because we want to learn from what's going on. That's what we do. That's what customer service is about, and that's what we need to to make sure happens. So yeah, no, okay, that's fine.
Well, thanks very much. I hope that you get some compliments, not just complaints the whole time.
Not so many, sir.
That has to go to the compliments team, does it? Yeah, yeah. Good. Any more comments, anybody? Right, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, when you're saying compliments, are they recorded as well?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, thanks for picking up on that, Rod. That's a good point. Well, you know, I mean, when things go wrong, somebody will tell 10 people, and when things go right, they'll tell 3 people. We just have to make sure that of those 3 people, you're one of them, I think. Okay, thank you for that. Now on to meaty, big and bouncy number 8, regulator for social housing consultation. This filled up, I don't know how many trees in our agenda pack, but nevertheless a very necessary and pertinent one to go through. One thing we have discussed is that it would have been nice if our papers had arrived at some days early when they're so detailed, and we'll pass that back later to see if we can get that out earlier. Of course, Annalisa did provide us with briefings on this earlier on, so we don't have too many excuses. On this agenda, Annalisa, do you want to take us through it, or do you want me just to zip through quick? Okay, you go ahead. Thank you.
I'm happy if you're happy. I've created a little presentation to try and pull out some of the salient points. So back when it was sunny and warm, I did send the Landlord Services Advisory Board all the information about the consultation that was happening with the regulator for social housing. So, you know, I gave you a gift of some summer reading. So hopefully you've had a little bit of time just to have a look at a few of the issues that have arisen. So essentially, what we can talk through today is, if my buttons are working. So I'll just confirm with you who is the regulator for social housing, why there are consumer standards that they're consulting on, what the proposals are, and then to get a view of what you think. So the regulator of social housing is part of the government machine, and they are there to protect social housing assets, to make sure that social housing providers, so by a social housing provider I mean a housing association or a local authority, for housing associations, they need to make sure they're financially viable and properly governed. For local authorities, the regulator of social housing doesn't have that requirement because that's sat within other bodies of government around local authorities. They need to maintain confidence for lenders to invest in the sector. So again, this is really focused on registered providers, as housing associations who are investing to build. They need to encourage and support the supply of social housing. They need to make sure that tenants are protected and have an opportunity to be involved in the management of their homes. And they need to ensure that the social housing sector delivers value for money. So that's their main remit. Over the last few years, they've been very focused on the finance and governance of housing associations. So they've got economic standards which are applicable to housing associations around governance and viability and value for money. So each housing association has to submit accounts and data annually to show that they're running correctly. And then there's also an economic standard about rent, so making sure there's some cohesion around the rents that are charged across the borough, across the country, and making sure that somebody's not tripling their rent in 1 year. And then they've had the consumer standards about tenant involvement and empowerment, the home standard, a tenancy standard, neighbourhood and community standard. And these consumer standards were there without any proactive regulation. the regulator of social housing would assume that landlords and tenants would make sure that they were meeting these standards, and they would only get involved if there was a serious detriment, which essentially meant there'd been a death in a property or something like that. And then you will recall we've had conversations about the new tenant satisfaction measures, which are the tenant insight information to find out how tenants are feeling about our service, and then the operational stats to make sure that we're delivering safe homes. So the consultation has come about following the Grenfell tragedy. So unfortunately, it's taken a long time, but we've sat in this room before and talked about the process that was followed after the Grenfell tragedy, when ministers and the government directly spoke to tenants, and they came up with the green paper and then the white paper to really put tenants at the heart of the service, to make sure that their voices were listened to. If you remember from the Grenfell tragedy, a lot of tenants had said they'd raised concerns about the safety of the building, the risk of fire, and their views had not been taken into account at all. So we had the Charter of Social Housing Tenants Residents was published a couple of years ago now, and we had a lot of discussion about that, and we really all agreed with the themes that were coming out of that, to make sure that your homes were safe, complaints were dealt with promptly and fairly, you knew how your landlord was performing. So moving on from the green paper, we finally got the Social Housing Regulation Bill that then was enacted in July. So all this feedback and information in the white paper and the green paper, and all the themes about tenant engagement and listening and rebuilding the relationship between landlords and tenants, have been put together in this law. And within the law, they're saying that the regulator for social housing now has powers and can hold people to account much more stringently to make sure that all social landlords are providing good quality homes and services, that they're prioritising tenant safety. So that's all the compliance issues, gas, and then we've got damp and mould, we've got asbestos, and the new concrete to look at. What's the aero concrete that came out? We're waiting for the next one, aren't we, Matt and Adrian, to see what's going to be the next issue for us to look at. We also, to make sure that tenants are treated with respect. So that's why I was a little disheartened to hear some of your comments this morning, but we really need to find out more about those and address those issues. And to be open and honest with tenants. We've again had conversations in this room about the fact that we can't deliver everything we would like to. We have to make decisions about what gets a priority. But as long as we're open and honest about those conversations and tenants can see where their rent money is being spent, then that's what we need to be doing. So again, you may remember that we had a representative from the regulator of social housing came along to a tenant member briefing. You may remember Kate Dodson. She was on the big screen. That's available to watch back if you're interested. And so the regulator was saying, we're going to get these new powers. We need to make sure we're using them effectively. And the considerations that they had was they felt that their powers, they must be used to make sure that it makes a meaningful difference to tenants, that it was deliverable by landlords. I could sit here and write a whole Bible of things that we need to do, but if we haven't got the money to do it, then we're not able to do that. So we need to make sure that they're deliverable, and that they need to be able to regulate them. They need to be able to see the difference. So there's consultation over the summer up until the middle of October for us to put our information, our comments in. And so they're moving away from the current consumer standards to the new proposed ones, and I will take each one in turn. So we've got safety and quality, transparency, influence and accountability standard, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is replacing the tenant involvement and empowerment one, neighbourhood and community, and then staying with the tenancy standard as well. I mean, overall, we support these proposed consumer standards, and it really gives that renewed focus on consumer regulation to protect tenants. I think it really bolsters a tenant's rights and creates a regulatory framework for people to be held account. So looking at the standards individually, as the safety and quality standard replaces the home standard. I'm happy to take questions as we go along and have a discussion. And it's not just me lecturing you, hopefully. Hopefully what I'm saying you may recall from some of the summer reading you did. So it's right and proper to make sure that we're managing homes and keeping tenants safe. We do checks on our homes to make sure they're safe. And the issue is that we need to make sure we've got good records of that so we can evidence the checks that we're making and making sure that things are as they should be. I think for Waverley, the challenge to meet this standard will be about record keeping, but we've got an item coming up further on the agenda about the IT asset management solution procurement. So that's going to help us with that. And we need to make sure that we've got regular compliance, monitoring and reporting. So you as a board should be able to come to the team at any point in time and say, oh, how are you getting on with your gas safety now? You know, are we at 100% yet? And we should be able to give that live information. When we're doing works, there's standards around repairs and maintenance, about it being easy to report a repair. So again, this is where we're going to need to do some robust self-assessment about how easy it is to report a repair, making sure we're keeping tenants informed about the works and taking a whole house view, I think, in some cases as well, so that we're not sending 3 different people out at 3 different dates if we can avoid it. So my thoughts about the safety and quality standard are that there's no information about voids and the turnaround time of voids. It's saying that repairs should be completed as swiftly as possible, but there's no comment about our empty homes. There's no recognition of challenges that a social landlord might have about accessing issues, gaining access to properties. And I would like to see some commitment to minimising the number of visits to tenants. So whether that be for a responsive repair or if we're doing all the different safety checks, if we can, you know, in the future, as a sector, look at minimising the inconvenience to tenants when we're doing those works. One of the interesting points about their requirements for adaptations was that it didn't actually state that the landlord had responsibility for adaptations. It said they must assist tenants in seeking home adaptations and to access appropriate services. So my suggestion on the consultation would actually be that I think there should be a minimum standard of expectations of what adaptations a social housing landlord would deliver. Because I think we find quite different housing associations will deliver aids and adaptations. Some of them will refer to our colleagues in the private sector housing team to access the, what's it called? The budget for, there's a different budget for homeowners and private sector. And so I just think that that's one point that we could seek clarification on in the consultation. Has anybody got any views about the safety and quality standard?
Thanks, Annalise. Yeah, just through the chair. Thank you. That's pretty good. I can see that you read it. Any questions? I mean, it's quite clear in terms of quality of homes, the first requirement. We need to have an accurate, up-to-date and evidenced understanding of the condition of the homes. That is always going to be one that we are chasing, because if we get round our complete stock every 5 years, then the one we started at is 5 years out of date. So I think we have to understand in terms of assessment how accurate we have to maintain that database, how often we have to assess. I mean, quite clearly, you know, when repairs are done to houses, that can update things. So, but it's the ones that we don't hear about, and we don't have enough, never have enough officers to go around knocking on doors to say, why did you change the colour of the house, or whatever. So, look, thank you very much for that. Any questions, Danielle?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of useful things in there, that's for sure. I also noticed that relets had kind of dropped out, and I couldn't find if they'd been dropped in again, but I don't think they have they?
No, I was looking, couldn't find.
And apologies if you said this, but on requirement 4, it says that getting repairs right first time, this means different things to different landlords. And I thought, well, it doesn't. First time's quite clear, and what they're proposing to change it to is quite wishy-washy, actually.
Yeah, it's an up for debate conversation about the right first time, and it's all would categorise jobs. So I think as a layperson, I would expect any job to be right first time. Like you come, you fix the issue, and it could be that you need to do other work to make it fit in the long run, but you resolve an immediate case. So we've had in the past, we've talked about, and we've had cases where jobs have been kind of categorized that, oh yeah, that job, it could be a right first time job, and that job would never be a right first time job because it's going to take a longer period of time. So what Waverley have done as an organisation is actually, we don't particularly monitor that through the contract in that way. We ask the tenant what their view of was the job fixed right first time. And again, it is open to debate and different opinions, because ultimately, I think right first time to me would mean that the problem was resolved. So it could be, I had a leak, you came, you turned the water off, the problem was resolved. You then came back the day after and did follow-up work to make sure my home was then normal working practice. But other people wouldn't think that that was right first time because the work hadn't been completed. So I think that's why they're talking about taking it out and it being a bit wishy-washy. I think what the regulator will be looking for is to focus more on the work is being completed in a way that a tenant is satisfied with, and trying not to get into the minutiae of different categories. Thanks.
Thanks, Annalisa. Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I'd just like to see the decent homes expand a bit, because, you know, we all want decent homes, but are we building the right homes? Are we meeting the demand of tenants? And I think that could be opened up more.
Okay, so again, the consultation and the proposal is that landlords will have to ensure that their homes meet the decent home standard. On my very last page of the presentation, I'll be telling you about new consultations that are on their way, and that one of those is Decent Homes Part 2. So there will be an opportunity to feed into what a decent home standard looks like nationally in the future. Okay, so moving on to transparency, influence and accountability standards. So by the way I've said it, you could probably get the feeling that I don't particularly like that name. I think tenant involvement and empowerment was much more focused on tenants, but what the regulator is trying to do is broaden out that definition of tenant involvement and making sure that the relationship between landlords and tenants is a positive one and a productive one. So we need to make sure that tenants are treated fairly and with respect. And I think this standard is really good because it really focuses on that good relationship between tenants and their ability to hold us to account for services. And also what's new in this one is about getting tenants involved in the decision making. Within that engagement with tenants, there's a real focus on decision making. So I'm very proud of the Landlord Services Advisory Board being a direct link for tenants to advise the executive and council. And we need to make sure that nationally this is something that's happening across the board for people. I think across the board there could be some kind of, there'll be some challenge about for people to implement that fairness and respect. You know, we've heard today, and it really is about culture and making sure that we're holding people to account if we hear people disrespecting tenants or speaking in a bad way. And addressing that negative stereotype that we fought so hard with our Pride or Prejudice piece of work. And I think we can't rest on our laurels with that. It's an everyday thing that we need to make sure that we're committed to. One of the comments that came from my team about respecting dealing with diverse needs is that yes, we could record people's ethnicity, disabilities and things on our system and hopefully make sure we look at that before we go and visit them. But one thing that it's kind of missing is the fact that actually people's needs vary over a lifetime, but then also sometimes over a number of months. And it's about making sure we can keep that information up to date. And I think that's something we might make a comment about, is that you don't collect people's needs once. It needs to be checked when you see them. Thinking about, you know, a tenant who had a hip replacement, they were more than capable and able. Then they had a few mobility issues. We made a note on the system to make sure we gave extra time to get them to open the front door. Then when they had the operation, they were completely incapacitated, couldn't open the door at all. But then, you know, 3 months later, fit as a fiddle, running around again. You know, we need to make sure that that information is kept live and up to date. One that I think you might find interesting is about the information that we share about the landlord services. And one of the outcomes is that we must share the roles and responsibilities of senior officers, and actually naming somebody who's responsible for compliance and naming somebody who's responsible for consumer standards. And also publicising their salary. To be open and transparent. Within local authorities, there are already rules about the salary of the senior team being displayed. I think it's a new thing to housing associations, so it'd be quite interesting to see how that happens. But our comment for the consultation is about those salaries aren't necessarily comparable. They've got to be put in context. So say we advertise what Annie Wrighton, our director's salary, is available online. But there's no context to that to say how much of her salary is proportioned to the landlord service and the tenant's rent. So that was a point we wanted to get across. And also the comment about complaints. So it's a little bit light in some areas about complaints, but we've got the Housing Ombudsman Service that very rigorously holds landlords to account. So I think it could avoid some duplication there within the standards and do some cross-referencing to make that easy. But I'd like to hear your comments about the transparency, influence and accountability standard.
Thanks, Annalisa. I have to apologise. I have neglected to thank Jeanette Englefield for 40 years dedicated service to tenants in this borough. I am mortified that I forgot. She had a leaving do a few days ago, and we had to get bigger rooms, really. Wonderful lady. My interaction with her goes back to the early parts of 2000, and she did a terrific thing for people in Mead Row in Godalming when floods came in and they were decanted with no expectation of returning. Things have really changed in the last 20 years in terms of what tenants expect and what tenants get, and rightly so. One thing though, I'm talking with Terry about this, tenant involvement officer recruitment presumably is happening to replace dear Jeanette. This is the sort of thing that we would like a representative of the tenants panel to be on the recruitment board and to be involved in specific recruitment. You might add that in a general area. Whether or not it is legally possible to do is another thing. Just an area. Now, no, I've stopped, sorry. Okay, Annalisa.
No, it's a very valid point, and you obviously weren't quite listening to my lovely colleague to my right. We have completed the tenant involvement officer recruitment, and I'm delighted to say that Joe Warrener has been successful in gaining that position. So we've had some lovely, we've had a lovely learning curve and succession of that post. So that's great. I take on board your point. It was raised to us at the time. We made efforts to try and make it happen. We have had information corporately, which we are now reviewing and looking to put a case forward to challenge. So I do believe that it would be a very good idea to have tenants involved in actually recruitment across the board in the housing service. I know that some housing associations do that very effectively, and we just need to make sure that all the proper channels are ticked and things like that. But it's a really good point that we could put back in our consultation feedback, that if you're really meaningful about tenant engagement, then we could suggest that that could be something that could be looked at within the standards, that as part of tenants being involved in the service, their views are taken into account through the recruitment process.
Thanks, Annalisa. Congratulations, Joe. Good man. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. Eh? Any more, Jackie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back on something on quality of homes on page 27. Sorry, I missed it. I wanted to go back on it. They say about understanding the conditions of the tenants' homes. And the reason I'm raising it is because, you know, there may be a tenant who is, for instance, a hoarder or something like that, who really their home is not their home anymore. It becomes just a place where they store stuff. And having seen stuff on the television about hoarders, it can be awful. So when, you know, looking at a tenant's home, it gives you an idea of whether they need help or not, because sometimes somebody doesn't know where to start to actually make their home livable again. So it's just a question that I have, is that how far do you go in terms of, you know, assessing a home for safety and health, and is the tenant, you know, sort of needing help in that respect? I know it's a strange one, but it does happen quite often, I think.
No, absolutely. And for me, it's about us making sure that the service is in the round and we've not got different work streams going on and we're not speaking to each other. So with the stock condition surveys that are happening at the moment, I know that they are live referring cases such as hoarding, any safeguarding concerns, any health and safety issues that they're finding in the homes. Those are all being reported through. All visiting officers get routine health and safety and safeguarding training so they can pick up issues. So anybody going into one of our properties, we always say you're our eyes and ears, and you even if it's not your job, you report back the issues that you've found so we can make sure we're providing a comprehensive service.
And I'd like to add my my thanks and the tenant panel's thanks to Jeanette for all the work that she's done to for the tenants panel in encouraging us to get involved, and also congratulations to Joe, and I'm sure that we'll be working well together. I think that it would be no surprise that I'm a bit concerned about the engagement with tenants, and how we're going to do that. You know, it can't be downplayed how important that has to be. But, and I'm going to take the opportunity to have a bit of a plug really, but, you know, we have 5,000 properties and we struggle to get 10 people representing representatives on the tenant panel. And we struggle to maintain that. And really, we need to look at what we're doing, because, you know, other landlords and groups have used incentives, including paid board members a gold status for repairs. So if you phone up, you get first attendance, which I think is totally unfair. But it's things that should happen. Vouchers and other inducements. But we really need to now start to look at, if we want tenants to become involved, you know, we've got to start looking at how we do that. And, you know, maybe that's the point of whether our regulator has any suggestions of how we can do that.
Yeah, so the regulators very, I can't quite remember the phrase because I haven't got the book next to me, but it's their expectation is that all social landlords will learn from others, particularly in tenant engagement. So we need to make sure that they know what good practice is, and show their efforts in getting tenants involved. And I think the statement is a range of meaningful ways for tenants to get involved. So now we've got Joe in post. That will be one of, predominantly his role in implementing our tenant involvement strategy, devising the new one, and creating more ways for us to collect views and get tenants involved. It's always a tricky one. We've had this conversation before. Generally, people get involved when they've got an issue, and then we keep them. But to actually just say, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in housing," and I think it's a different way. We need to think of different ways to engage with people. We are doing the satisfaction surveys for responsive repairs. We're doing more work. Our aim is to do focus groups on some of the policies that are coming up. So, and then speaking to people who've just had that service. So when we get the chance to do the mutual exchange review, we'll talk to people who've been through the mutual exchange process and really find that lived experience so we can get really engaged with that. What I should have said at the start is obviously not obviously, but the regulator is consulting on these standards, and part of the reason to bring them to you was, one, to get your feedback on whether you think they're the right standards and do they reflect the journey we've been on since Grenfell, and secondly, to raise the awareness of the standards with you, because we're going to have to start coming back to you with self-assessments against these standards and demonstrating how we meet them, where we're not meeting them fully, where there isn't one where we're not meeting them at all, and the actions that we've got in place, and that will feed into the budget setting process about what we need to do and what changes we need to make and how we need to resource them. I think Matt and Adrian alluded to, the resources available for compliance, and again, our investment in tenant engagement and IT systems to hold the data and be able to report. So there's a lot of work for us to be done, but I think it's will all be ultimately for the benefit of tenants, and we'll be able to improve our services.
Andrew?
Thank you for that comment. The good thing about this is obviously there's many boroughs, councils around the country, so presumably you're able to access more successful councils who have got very effective tenant relationships and engagements. Is there anything we can learn from other councils on that, and just basically not have to reinvent the wheel?
No, absolutely. I think anybody who's known me longer than 5 minutes knows that I don't start anything with a blank piece of paper. So we're always looking at good practice. We're corporate members of the Chartered Institute of Housing, who publish a lot of good practice papers and advice and webinars and briefings. We're also members of a group called Housing Quality Network, which again is a network of housing providers who share good practice, challenges. And then we've got our local connections as well. And I'm a member of the South East group, the Chartered Institute of Housing. So just yesterday, my colleagues had a conversation with one of our peers at A2 Dominions about how they deal with decant properties, which is when people have to move. So we don't sit in isolation. We do a lot of, what would you call it, cross-fertilization, I guess.
Thanks very much.
Yes, and I'm glad that the tenant panel members are given the opportunity to attend some of the conferences, and that gives us the opportunity to speak to other organisations and their tenants, And one thing I did forget to say about incentives is one organisation that has a fish and chip van that goes around and talks to their tenants, and I don't know whether they give them free fish and chips, but on their larger estates, but there's lots to do.
Surely it should be quail's eggs and caviar. Jackie, I think we're going to have to do a bit of zipping in the next 25 minutes, but let's concentrate on the big bits first. Jackie.
Yeah, it's just a comment really about getting the tenants to participate. I mean, the thing is, very often you find that once the tenant's in their home and they're happy in their home, then they don't really want to be involved in sort of tenants panels and things like that, because unless they've got a problem, we've got 5,000 homes, You know, if they're happy, they're not going to come to the council unless they need a repair or something. So I think we have to take some comfort from that, really. You're doing a good job, Annalisa, with your team.
I would love to take the fact that we don't hear from our majority of tenants means that they're all happy and content in their homes. And some of them will be, absolutely, and you know, probably the majority. But one of the things that has come out, a phrase that's really stuck within the team recently, is know your silence. And it's where people, are we okay? So know your tenant silence, know your silence. Who isn't getting in touch with us? We've had a conversation here before about how older people are scared to complain because they think that we're going to evict them. So that's another piece of work that we want to do with tenant involvement and engagement, is actually reaching out to people and working out where our silences is. Sometimes it's easier in larger authorities, and as Terry said with the fish and chip ban, if we had a tower block where all the tenants were ours, put a fish and chip ban at the bottom, no problem, great. Put it in the middle of Farnham where you've got a whole mixed community, we might not get the people we want to speak to. So, and I'm not giving tenants rents money to fish and chips to people who aren't tenants. So I absolutely take on board. A lot of people don't want to get involved. If they're happy, no problem, but we need to make sure that we are finding those silences and finding the cases where people are sat, as you said, you know, the lady who didn't have a flushing toilet, you know, we need to make sure we know those cases.
Thanks very much. Annalisa, will you be mentioning the fact that we don't have the joys of the RSH for free, that this will be costing us somewhere between 40 and 100,000 pounds a year? Is that right?
Yes, you're obviously looking at my next slides along. What I'll do, I'll move swiftly along. I think the ones we've spoken about are the ones that are of most interest to you around tenant involvement and the buildings themselves. But there are consumer standards about neighbourhood and community, and this is about making sure that landlords are responsible for shared spaces, that they cooperate. And we've had this as a council with some housing associations and who work in our borough, and we haven't necessarily cooperated very well on grounds maintenance or bin collection and those type of things. Also, picking up from the green paper and the white paper was about making sure landlords are held account to support domestic abuse and make sure people are safe, and also a lot of work about working together for antisocial behaviour. And I think one of the challenges has been that tenants don't know who to complain to or who to contact when there's an antisocial behaviour case. Is it antisocial behaviour? Is it a landlord issue? Is it a police issue? Is it a community trigger issue? I know my colleagues in the communities team have been doing some work on a new antisocial behaviour policy, which will go across everybody in the borough. So it would be interesting to see that come through. But just for comments, what I think is missing from this standard is the white paper, as well as talking about antisocial behaviour and domestic abuse, also spoke about the health and well-being of tenants and their physical and mental health. And one of the points was about making sure that if possible, people could have pets in their home, because that helped isolation and mental health. And that was really missing, I thought, in the standard. And also, I would like to see some more guidance about the shared responsibilities, because, again, I'm repeating myself, we've spoken before in this room about how housing are picking up when other services are pulling back. And I think we need to make sure that it doesn't, you know, a landlord by themselves cannot resolve antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, poor physical health.
But surely that would come under the joint action group, wouldn't it? When you're talking about antisocial behaviour and what have you, because that's where you all meet to discuss all this and try and work it out.
Yeah, so locally we've got some really good resources. I'm just thinking nationally that these standards are going to be across the board. You know, there will be, how do we make sure that housing associations get involved in those groups and work with the local authority and the police? So that's why I just thought there could be a little bit more guidance on that.
Chris.
Yeah, can I just ask on that, this neighbourhood and communities, so I don't know how Waverley, I mean, this to me, when you read this, I mean, I have a situation with our residents group, for example, that there are various things around there that are not the responsibility of Waverley, but this bit may be Surrey County Council. The little road that runs around our unit is Highways Agency. I mean, but surely this proposal is looking at the business of drawing those all in. So we just have to contact Waverley.
Yeah, the standard is to try and, my view, and I think my understanding of it, is that the standard is trying to make sure that registered providers don't say nothing to do with me. If it's impacting their tenant, they should be able to signpost effectively, and if it's or do joint working. So I think you're right. We need to make sure that Waverley as a landlord is able to support you by signposting, or in some issues having partnership arrangements to work with different agencies to resolve issues.
That's a good point, Chris. Annalisa, can we shoot on? I'm still aiming to finish by 12, so as soon as we can.
Okay, so the final one is the tenancy standard, which pretty much replicates what we've already got. You'll remember we did a big piece of work last year. We've removed the use of flexible tenancies, so we are definitely giving people the most secure form of tenancy we can. We've always had very good tenancy sustainment and reduction. You know, an eviction is a failure for Waverley. I think we've seen with some housing associations that they just want the money, and and nationally, I think the picture's quite different. So I really welcome the fact that these standards are saying that housing associations must assist their local authorities with their homelessness duties. So hopefully that will give us much more access to homes as well to help people. And there was a bit of a change with mutual exchanges, and it's making sure that all social landlords have a platform that tenants can access to look for swaps for homes, and support them if they're unable to use those online resources. So generally, overall, I'm really happy with the standards. I do think they reflect the work that was done following Grenfell. There's some duplications, so I think within our consultation response, we'll kind of ask for some cross-referencing or clarity to avoid those duplications. There's a little bit of clarity required about actually who these standards apply to. It does say licensees, tenants, but whether that means people in temporary accommodation or not is unclear. The rent standard is in the finance standard, but I think there's an argument to say that the rent element should have a consumer standard as well, about the way we collect rent and the way we work with people who are in debt. I think that would fit better in a consumer standard. And my final kind of question to ask would be about the how they're going to be reporting back when they've monitored against these standards. Is it going to be like the governance ones where you get a number 1 to 4? Is it going to be a simple pass or fail? The regulator's very clear, they're not going to be handing out gold stars to housing providers because there are national and local issues. So I think that would be interesting. And as you said, overall, there's the capacity issue. We've struggled to get surveyors, get people to do fire risk assessments, the availability of people to do damp and mould consultations. And I think that's what the guidance is missing. There's that, what do we do if we haven't got the capacity or the resources to deliver these things? What happens next?
Terrific, Annalisa. Thank you very much. Would it be possible to circulate this? And when the responses are ready to go, would you be able to copy that round to us too? Lovely. Well,
finally, there is a second consultation. So this is a lot of work that the regulator of social housing has not done before, and there is a cost attributed to that. So they're consulting on the fees as well at the moment. So a local authority has never historically paid the regulator any fees, because we now come under the consumer regulations, consumer standard regulations from the 1st of April. They will be charging a fee. So the finance team were delighted with me when I said we need to make sure we've got provision for this next year. So at the moment they're proposing that a large housing association would be between £9 and £10 per property, and a local authority would be between £7 and £8 per property, which anybody who's got good maths is about £40,000 a year for us to pay for the regulator to hold us to account. I think it's good for our tenants, but whether tenants feel that that money might be better spent in a different way, but I don't think we're going to have a choice. But there is an opportunity to feedback about the fees. My view is that given the fact that we're not getting the finance or governance assessment, how come ours is still pretty much the same as the housing associations, because we're not getting the same level of service.
And Lisa, thank you very much for that. Danielle, I'm just going to say, if there are any other thoughts, if you can just feed them back through to Annalisa afterwards. Danielle, is it quick, please?
It is quick. Is that money coming out of the rents money or out of a separate pot?
Have you got a magic pot of money? No, it's coming out of the rent money.
Just to add really that having read through this, I think it's a great thing for tenants. We should support it. The only concern is whether Waverley or any organisation's got the capacity to cope with it.
As always, Terry, this is why we need you tenants to come in and do it all for us for free.
Exactly right, yeah.
And Lisa, on to the next one then. Still aiming to finish before bedtime. But I do recognise that we've had a very full agenda this morning and still a few things to go. So bear with us.
Thank you. It's me again for the Q1 performance report. So as we mentioned, we had William here. So hopefully some of the questions around the performance and the red indicators on page 6, we've had a discussion on that. And then just really to highlight some of the things we did in the first 3 months of the financial year. We've got our gas safety issues resolved. We're back on track with that. We had a positive result from the regulator about the work we've done to tackle the poor performance in gas safety. We've cracked on with the stock condition surveys and also carbon monoxide detectors. So we did a quick check. We were due to complete putting all the carbon monoxide detectors in by August. We're pretty much there. We've just got about 90 that we've got some access issues with, that we're working with the tenants to make sure those are done. As Terry mentioned, tenant panel members went to housing conference in May and another one in June, which was really beneficial. We've done some work on reviewing our IT systems, which I alluded to earlier, and we've got CCTV installed in all our senior living schemes to enhance the security and safety for tenants.
Thanks very much. Any questions? Danielle and Terry, good thing that we have coloured printing, isn't it? Danielle.
I see in Tom Hallward's report, he mentions that the 10-year leisure centre contract was awarded to everyone active, and then immediately the edge shut. Is that coming back? Why was that? What happened? Is it going to cost us a fortune just to have an empty building rotting?
That's something I'll have to take offline and come back to you. I'm a housing specialist, not a leisure specialist, I'm afraid.
Jackie and then Terry.
Just from a councillor perspective, the edge is an ongoing situation. So there are talks it won't be a rotting building because 60% of the use is by Walmer Hill School. So, but there are talks with Surrey and Waverley and MAT, which is the collaboration of schools. So they're all talking about it, but it certainly won't rot. Okay.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I mean, it's pleasing to see that the gas safety checks are being completed and to quite a high standard now. The only concern I have is that one tenant, and I believe has put a formal complaint in, that the representative was there for 7 minutes doing that check.
Okay, we'll pick that up through the complaints process. Thank you.
Okay, now the next three items are entirely, or very nearly entirely, exempt. They're here primarily for your awareness. I don't want to go into exempt to discuss it for another reason, that it's nearly 12 o'clock. But I just wanted to cover them off briefly. Officers, were any of you going to talk on any of these?
I can do. Hugh Wagstaff gave his apologies. So just to say, the first one is about us procuring a asset management IT solution. So this is a system to manage all the information we hold about our properties. So as we've mentioned, we're doing stock condition surveys. We need to hold that information centrally, and then we can use it to do planned works. We'll also hold information about our compliance and all the information that we've talked about with gas, asbestos, and those type of things. So the current system we have isn't fit for purpose, and we've taken proactive steps to do some market analysis and follow the procurement rules that the council have, and we've come up with a solution that we're really happy with, that's giving us value for money and delivers all the services we need it to.
Thank you. And quite clearly, as we discussed, it's a necessary and sensible thing forward. Number 11, aids and adaptations extension. This is a specific piece of work that we are looking to do with support from the County Council on making an adaptation suitable for a young person. We don't need to discuss it in detail. If you want to read it, it's all in there. And similarly, in item 12.
So again, we've brought this to you to be open and transparent about the use of the HRA funds. You'll remember a little while ago, we brought to you a paper about buying back a bungalow. We're now looking to buy back a 3-bedroom property that was a former council tenancy that had been leased out to different people. It's a really good opportunity to buy back a family home. But generally our view is to buy back smaller properties so we can assist with downsizing and helping people who are under occupying family homes move to smaller properties.
Thanks very much. And Lisa, any general questions on those items? Good. It's my role in the next meeting just to confirm that we've gone through all of these processes, which includes making it the LSA be aware of that. Danielle?
Just on the new system, the only thing that wasn't mentioned was cybersecurity, but obviously I'm sure that was one of the things at the top of your list that you were going to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will sit within the Waverley IT infrastructure. I don't know all the technical phrases, but yes, it's been robustly checked, and it will make sure that the information is held confidentially.
Good question, Danielle. Well, once more, and finally, to Annalisa for a brief puff on our work programme, which will take us up well past Christmas.
Yeah, apologies that they weren't the work plan wasn't attached to the agenda. I will circulate after the meeting. So for next month, we're looking at Smith and Byford, the gas contractor, coming in to speak to you. You may recall that back in January they came in when they started the contract, so we'll get a nice update from them. You know, the fact that we're now on target with our gas safety checks, and also what steps they've got in place, because we know the minute people start turning their heatings on, we get an increase in requests for gas servicing and issues. We'll give an update on the aids and adaptations review. So you may be aware, we had a housing ombudsman case that found, it was in the local press, found that there had been some maladministration. So we've taken steps and got an action plan to share with you about how we're improving the aids and adaptations process and making sure that that doesn't happen again. We will also, there'll be a procurement issue about senior living fire alarms that will come through for decision, and also St James's Court, which is a property in Farnham, and we've been doing an asset review on, and we'll share that information with you before a final decision as well. I did have Social Housing Regulation Act on this work plan before I knew about the consultation, so I think we'll probably try and keep a lighter agenda for October. I appreciate your time and commitment and comments today.
Thank you, Annalisa. Thank you for all your contributions leading up to this this meeting and going forward too. Any final questions? Perfect. Date of next meeting is the 19th of October here at 10 o'clock. Look forward to seeing you then. And with pleasure, the end of the meeting. Thank you indeed.